Welcome to the Steroids Podcast with your host, Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand. Boom! Boom! Let's get started here. The Steroids Podcast is brought to you by Ultimate Guide to Roids, 109-page ebook by Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand. Now, for the first time in bodybuilding history, you have someone with no corporate interests and no obligation to please anyone, not walking on eggshells to not offend. Ultimate Guide to Roids gives you the information, the whole truth, not a full truth and a half truth, full truth. Ultimate Guide to Roids gives you the keys to the Lamborghini, gives you the information, and lets you decide what to do with it. It's a crime this information has been suppressed this long. Now let's get on with the podcast.
All right, welcome back to the Steroids Podcast, everybody. We got Dtren back here again. We're just gonna do some steroids talk for you guys. Talk about, what Dtren is doing, and talk about bodybuilding. I think one of the coolest things about you and I, Dtren, talking together is that it's like a really open conversation about like gear and bodybuilding and how it all goes together. And a lot of people they're not opposed to that kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of hard to find people talking about steroids so openly, especially, it's just not something that's common.
Yeah. The other day, I was seeing you on another podcast. Somebody sent me a clip from it where you were saying something about how you were reading in Ultimate Guide to Roids that, pro bodybuilders take grams of test, grams of DECA, lots of IUs of growth hormone, etc. And then that you were, experimenting with those kinds of things. And I remember just hearing you say that. And even though I wrote Ultimate Guide to Roids, it was still kind of shocking to hear another person say it.
Yeah, you're like, really? Like, someone's really talking about that? Like, that's so insane. Like, this guy's running this much shit. Yeah, it's like, it does kind of give you that shock effect. Yeah.
There's something about grams, right? Because most people are in milligrams. And if you ever say, oh, I'm on a gram of this or a gram of that, it's like, what?
Yeah, it's like all of a sudden once you hear the word gram, it's so much like, 500 milligrams, that's fine, but a gram of testosterone, you gotta be out of your fucking mind.
Yeah.
And it's like more people would rather hear a gram of TREN, it seems. More people are normal to that than compared to a gram of testosterone. Like, a gram of testosterone, you don't even need above 500. They'll say that, like, that's way too much,
I don't know if
it's
you
funny.
listened to any Dave Palumbo, but Dave Palumbo, he does that RX Muscle, and he says on there that every cycle, or your first cycle even, I think he says you should start with a gram of test.
Yeah, I did actually hear that. I think I heard it from you. That was like the perfect cycle, he said, or perfect beginner cycle was just a gram of test only.
I mean,
to be honest, that's actually, it's a little bit on the extreme end, but it's actually, if you wanted to get the full effects of being a bodybuilder, like your goal is to be a bodybuilder, and yeah, I could see someone doing that and really enjoying it. 500 is really underwhelming for a lot of guys that I've helped with gear, from what I've noticed.
For me, on my first cycle, I started with 600 milligrams of test, and I front loaded that. My first shot ever was 2 600 milligram shots, one in each hip of testosterone and anthate, and so it was 1,200 milligrams into me. I got the worst test flu, man. Because 1,200 milligrams in one day to start out, ever using steroids before. And, after a month, people were asking me like, I was in college and people were asking me, Dan, it looks like you're getting fat or something.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, that initial estrogen increase and all the glycogen in the water from the hormonal fluctuations definitely, especially when I would run tests in D-ball, people would think my body, like, it looks like your body fat is like a lot higher than what it really is. A lot of water weight.
Cycle. Did you do testosterone?
Yeah, I did 500 tests and 20 D-ball the first 6 weeks. And then once the D-ball ran out, I stayed on 500 tests, and around week 8 to, I think around week 9 to 15, I did Trenbolone and Proviron. I did 75 milligrams Trenbolone and like 100 Proviron to end that cycle.
Whoa, what made you think Proviron for a first cycle?
I heard that it could lean you out a bit, and I remember hearing that Arnold really liked it, and I wanted to be like Arnold, so I took Proviron, and I heard it gives you, freeze up test, and gives you that sex drive increase, and I wanted that, and that's exactly what I got from it. So that's why I took it. I knew it wasn't going to give me a lot of gains, but I wanted to look a little bit leaner, and I figured it would be a good addition, even though it's not common to run Proviron on the first cycle I did it.
Yeah, that's a unique one.
Yeah.
Talking about sex drive too, I mean, that's one of the things that really, you get so much higher sex drive when you're on cycle, when you're on roids. I've been I've blasted roids, most of the time for about a decade, but last 3 months I've been on 200 milligrams testosterone cypionate, TRT, and dude, my sex drive is like 25% of what I'm used to it being for the last decade.
You know what I think it is? Not that you haven't figured it out. I don't think you're taking AI, right?
I'm taking AI. I am.
How much are you taking?
I take it as I notice symptoms. So I'm doing a combination right now of Nolvadex. I'm taking 20 milligrams Nolvadex every day, and doing that to increase the LH and FSH production from my hypothalamus. Because my testicles are shut down from having been here for so long, and so
yeah,
it took about 2 weeks of the Nolvadex on the lower dosage of testosterone, started getting some response in the balls. But then I take the exemestane a couple times per week when I feel like I need it, and definitely my sex drive goes up when I take the exemestane.
Wow, that's interesting. What I think is true from my experiences of being on gear for almost 3 years now. Started when I was 19. Yeah, about 3 years. I'm 22, so actually 3 years and like 2 months.
Been on
is my
last
sex
couple time too. Not really much cruising.
I've cruised around 3 or 4 times. My longest cruise was around 11 or 12 weeks, but usually they're around 6 to 8. So I've been on a few of them.
That's actually pretty decent, man. For being for being known as an extreme user, you're actually, that's what everybody's doing, man.
Yeah, and I would do cruises. I tried cruising on 100 tests, 150 tests, 250 tests, 500 tests. I've done cruises with all those numbers. I like 250 the most now. But what I was going to say is regarding the sex drive, I believe it's entirely upon, it's either how much testosterone you're taking. So if you take more, obviously you're going to have that higher sex drive, and estrogen. I've noticed ever since I ran lower testosterone, I may look better, like leaner, but my sex drive is so below what it was when I was natural. The past year or so, it's been like that. But when I would run the higher tests and lay off on the aromasin, my sex drive was insane, like uncontrollable. Like it was crazy, and I figured it has to be estrogen related, and I believe that's why a lot of bodybuilders, that's why you preach high testosterone, that's why a lot of guys say test is king. I believe there's a lot of truth to that, especially how you feel mentally. I feel like some guys could do better on lower estrogen, but I've noticed since the last year, since I've been on gear, when my test is higher and my E2 rides a bit higher than normal, not too high, but higher than normal, my sex drive is like borderline impossible to control. Versus when I run my tests lower, I throw an AI in there, it's very like average. Like I feel like a 40-year-old man in terms of my sex drive.
40 years
like,
old.
Yeah, I feel 40 years old. Like 45. Like after a round or two, I'm done for the entire day. Like, all right, that's it. I'm ready to go to bed now.
Are you a relationship guy, or are you a guy that doesn't do relationships?
I am huge on relationships. I used to be more of a bit of a hoe, I used to be a player. It wasn't for me. I was very I guess unfulfilled. So it's always good having someone I believe that you care about, that cares about you, and sex is always better that way. So I believe on steroids, it's good to have someone that you could bond with and have sex with.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're not promiscuous then?
No, I used to be. I used to be very promiscuous. I would say a little bit, but like I said, my sex drive has been so low the past year, so it's like any source of promiscuous behavior isn't really even there to begin with. You know what I mean? I'm like, whatever. Yeah. I'd rather go work out.
Yeah.
It kind of sucks. I miss that. I miss the fucking high sex drive, the energy that comes with it. And my conclusion is it comes down to either testosterone levels or estrogen, or maybe a mix of both, like aromatization. And, if you're running a bunch of like DHT derivatives and low test, I don't know how the fuck your sex drive would be high. Maybe some people, but it's just what I've noticed since I've been on steroids.
Well, you've been through a lot of experimentation since we last talked on the podcast. I think you even took out TREN for a while. You started running for the first time, right?
I did. I've been running Primo for about 5 to 6 weeks. I took out TREN, and right when I took out TREN, I noticed I looked really lean because I front loaded the Primo very high, like 3 grams first week front load. I got it all for free, so it's 200 milligrams per milliliter, and I got a lot of it. So I was like, fuck it, I always wanted to use this shit. I wanted to kick in fast, so I'm gonna use it. And as the weeks gone on, I looked really, really lean, like as lean as I've ever been. And what I think it was slowly crashing my estrogen. I was running low tests with it.
Mm-hmm.
In these past few weeks or so, like I noticed I would get really obsessive thoughts, and my hair started falling out a lot. And people say they get hair loss on Primo, but it doesn't make sense because it's not very androgenic. I don't lose hair on Mastron. I can run a gram of Mastron, I'm fine. But I think the Primo is just crushing my E2, and when people get really low E2, they tend to shed. It's not the same as like hair loss, like male pattern baldness, at least I don't think. But I noticed when my E2's low, I shed more, and that's what it was giving me. And like I almost didn't want to be an influencer for a while. Like I was so like just negative, like kind of feeling like a pussy.
Huh.
Like I just felt kind of like a bitch. Like I was like complaining about everything. I was always in a bad mood. I didn't feel aggressive, and it came down to me that Primo, like the 2 steroids I don't really react the best to is Primo and Equipoise, because they just crush my estrogen if I'm not running a 1-to-1 ratio, testosterone.
Well, I testosterone and Primobolan go good at the same dosage, like 1,000 milligrams Primo, 1,000 milligrams testosterone, or 1,500 milligrams Primo, 1,500 milligrams testosterone. I mean, what would you say the effective dosage range is with Primo? I mean, I'd say I start seeing it at 600 milligrams, and then, from 1,000 milligrams to up to 2,000 milligrams is where the effects are just, sick.
Yeah, I would say around there. I would say 600. I've heard some guys say they feel it at 250, like when they cruise, they'll do like 250, 250. And I heard that some guys say they still feel it and notice the effects if they're die at some point. But I would say around 600 is like, you shouldn't really run it less than 600 because you won't really notice much. But I'd say once you get up to about a gram, 1,200 milligrams, it becomes really strong. Like,
Mhm.
it doesn't have the common, like what you think of Primobolan. And people are like, oh, it's a weak steroid, but around that, gram to 1,200 milligram mark, it gets pretty strong. Like you can really see the effects it gives on your physique. And it's not something you feel a whole lot. You're not going to really feel like you're on anything. You're just going to look better. You notice what it does to your physique. It's really anabolic. What I could say, it's like a beefier Anavar, if I could compare it to anything. Like imagine an injectable Anavar.
Anadrol and Primobolan are very similar effects.
Yeah, so Anavar has a bit more, I feel like, CNS drive than Primo. Primo doesn't really have much of
Mhm.
that really at all. It's just primarily anabolic.
Although heart rate on Primobolan can kind of increase. Did you get that at all?
Yeah, I did. And I think that's how Primobolan and Equipoise are compared a lot because they're both more like an athletic endurance, like steroids. I've noticed since I've been on Primo, I could do a lot more volume than, let's say,
Mhm.
if I was on a test and TREN cycle, a test and Primo cycle. It's like I could do 50 sets of workout, 40 sets for 2 body parts. Like it's probably why the golden era dudes really liked their higher volume because they were running Primobolan.
Yeah, well, it's one of those roids that, like, if once you've got the good stuff, you don't really need to use a whole lot else because it just grows muscle tissue well and it doesn't give side effects. So I remember when I
Yeah.
was in Turkey, I was getting the Bayer Remobolans over the counter there, and I started I started at 1,000 milligrams per week because it's cheap as shit, and
Yeah.
but then, I was just running the Sustanon with the Primobolan, and eventually I was using 5 milliliter syringes to take this stuff, and I would be taking 5 milliliter syringe, 4 or 5 times a week. So it went up somewhere around 1,500 tests, and somewhere between 1,200 to 2,000 milligrams Primobolan, depending on the week. And but I wasn't taking other stuff. I was just taking that. But the
Yeah.
effects of that were so strong. I would say if somebody's going to take test, TREN, Mastron, Anadrol, Winstrol, Equipoise, whatever else, mixing all this shit together, I mean, you're going to get a bunch of milligrams. We all know most big bodybuilders are running around somewhere between 2.5 to 3.5 grams on average per
Yeah.
week. You can just do that with Primo.
Yeah. I was curious, I had a question. When you ran, let's say, a straight testosterone or a test and TREN cycle, let's say, all right, so let's say when you ran a gram of Primo and a gram of test, did you hold as much water as if you ran a gram of testosterone, or did you feel like the water was kind of put in the muscle a bit different? Like, was it distributed better, or did it really not change? Did it still give you kind of, because when you run the test a bit higher, you will get a bloofy appearance. Did throwing the Primo help at all with maybe looking a bit leaner or a bit more aesthetic versus a test only cycle or a test and TREN cycle around the same dosages?
Oh, absolutely, man. It is because I know exactly what you're talking about. When you run a high testosterone cycle, you can tell that look, and it's a
Yeah.
certain look. It actually looks like a WWE wrestler.
Yeah, it's
Like
really
classic,
thick.
like Hulk Hogan or something like that. You get that kind of cosmetic appearance from running high testosterone. And when you run the Primobolan at the same dosage, especially if you have growth hormone in that, it completely redistributes the way the water is and the cosmetic effect of the that it does not even look that you don't even resemble that WWE wrestler look anymore. It's like it just becomes that sick alien growth hormone, what the hell type of look.
Yeah. 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 And did you notice that with TREN too? So if you were to run, let's say, a gram of test and a gram of TREN, or a high dosage of Trenbolone, would it give that same effect that Primobolan would give, or is that just for Primobolan only? Like, it's one of the characteristics of Primobolan, or would TREN give something like that, or would it, would it not? Would it be outshadowed by the high testosterone?
I with the high testosterone and the TREN, with the growth hormone, I did and do notice more water retention still being outside of the muscle than I do with testosterone and Primobolan.
Wow, wonder why that is. Because people hear TREN, they hear, oh, dry, grainy, square. Wonder why TREN still do that. Because you think TREN is a cutting steroid, it dries you out, keeps you lean. Wonder why Primobolan, which is weaker, wonder why that would give that effect versus TREN, which doesn't. And maybe it's an estrogen issue. I don't know. What do you think?
Have you gotten some? Because I think we've talked about you get some water retention with Trenbolone usage. Is that true?
I do. Yeah, I don't know why I do with TREN. Every time I run it, I get a little bit, mainly in my midsection, a little bit under my chin, and kind of just in my muscles a bit. I hold a little bit more water. I don't know why. If it's a thyroid issue, I'm not too sure, but I noticed that with TREN, it makes me hold a little bit of water, because when I drop the TREN and switch to Primo, it's like I look like I've dropped 3% body fat in 2 weeks. Like I got really, really lean. Like, the point my abs looked how I always wanted them to look. The point I could take my shirt off and I would feel comfortable flexing. Versus on TREN, I'll be like, on TREN, I'd be like, man, I look really good, but my midsection's kind of bloated. I don't really want to take off my shirt. Even though I have veins everywhere, it's like, I don't know. I noticed that with Primobolan.
Yeah, well,
why?
When the Trenbolone, one of the things with it is that if it's run high at all, which guys, one of the dosages, for the guys that listen to podcasts, that the dosages that people usually run TREN at is 200 milligrams up to 1,000. That's pretty much the range you see. And the higher Trenbolone, when it gets up high like that, that seems to be when these issues come with the water retention being caused by the TREN. And one of the things with that is that TREN stimulates like basically every sex hormone receptor. And for one thing, a lot of guys don't have total control of their prolactin when they're on TREN. They'll notice that however much, even if they're using cabergoline, et cetera, they will still be able to have, stuff coming out of their nipples, et cetera, or they'll still have some deep stinging pain in their nipples, et cetera. And one of the things is, if you don't take cabergoline and you take TREN and your prolactin gets high, you'll have a ton of water retention. And then if you go and start taking cabergoline, you'll notice overnight a diuretic effect where the water retention will drain out of your skin. So, when we're talking about high dosage Trenbolone and then guys getting water retention from that, first thing that comes to mind is that they're getting overstimulation of some of these sex hormone receptors, such as prolactin, and they're just not able to control it.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely interesting. So you believe that TREN, to get the best out of it, you should probably run a lower, more moderate dose?
I do, yeah. Personally, I've experimented with very high dosages of Trenbolone and low dosages of Trenbolone. My experimentation range with Trenbolone has been between 150 milligrams per week up to 1,400 milligrams per week. And the dosage that I think is the most effective is to use it between 175 to 350 milligrams per week. And if you want to use it, I think it goes good underneath a normal cycle. So instead of having TREN be the featured item in the cycle, running a normal cycle, running all your normal stuff, and then just boom, you put that little bit of TREN underneath it. And that's where I think TREN gives the best effects.
Yeah, that does make sense. I feel like TREN, if you run it very high, from my experiences, it does give quite a bit of water retention. Um, Even if you lower your test, it won't give as much as like a high testosterone, but it does give water retention. It's almost like kind of like mint a bit, but you would imagine that to be, I feel like, since it is a 19-nor, they probably do act similar in some ways. Besides TREN not raising estrogen, it does have some effects, I believe, on estrogen, maybe making you a bit more sensitive. So if you were to run a gram of TREN, you could have a similar look to maybe what a ment would give you, just not as watery. You know what I mean? I would assume. I could be wrong, but people say ment is a very wet steroid, and Deca and Nandrolone tend to be wetter steroids. TREN, if you run it very high, it look a little bit wet. When I run it high, it's like if I pin 100 milligrams a day, when I'm running a dry cycle, it looks like I can gain 10 pounds in like 2 weeks. Like my physique just I look thicker, but it's like I would definitely will lose that definition if I throw that high TREN in there. It's really weird. You think the opposite would happen.
Yeah, some people talk about like, oh, I take TREN and then all of a sudden I get smaller. That's not the case with myself. It sounds like it's not the case with you either.
Definitely not. And that's what really drew me to Primobolan. But the thing is I've been running low test with it, and it's just been making me feel like shit. Like, I'm like, man, fuck. And I was thinking, man, like, maybe I should increase my testosterone, because you said that, hey, Primobolan, when you run a high test, higher Primobolan, like a gram each, it's really not that bad. And I was thinking, maybe that's what you have to do with Primobolan, because I probably wouldn't be able to run it at a lower test high Primo as much as I'd want to, because it just totally screws my mental health, like worse than what TREN would do, because that low E2 is so terrible, bro.
Man,
you just feel so lethargic and lazy, and that's kind of what I've been experiencing the past 2 or 3 weeks.
so you've been how much total have you been? Because you've been running Primobolan at a bunch of different dosages now, right? So
yeah, I dropped
high,
it back
low,
to a gram. I dropped it back to a gram.
okay.
And I wanted to add in Trenbolone. We talked about this, so I threw it in at 350. And once I did that, I threw the TREN in there. I noticed I just started looking less leaner, and it helped with the high E2, like the low E2 sides. Like, I wasn't feeling like shit as much. Like, oh yeah, I feel pretty good, but I've been having to really rely on stimulants a lot past like year. I would say 6 months, and I kind of lost a lot of my definition. And I believe it's, someone said that low E2 could give you that, or it could be the TREN that if you really get low E2, you'll hold on to water, or maybe it's the TREN just giving you that water retention.
Yeah, TREN can occupy the estrogen receptor. It's really like it because it's got that effect where it hits all sex hormone receptors. So, people will be on TREN and they'll get a blood test and they'll look at their estrogen, and their estrogen will be through the roof. And they'll be like, what's this? Because the blood test is picking up the Trenbolone as estrogen on the test. And, a lot of guys will notice that they can't crash their estrogen when they're on TREN. So pre-contest, I'll be working with guys and they'll be coming up to their show. Most of the guys I work with are classic physique, some open bodybuilders, but mostly classic physique. And, they'll be coming up to their show and they'll be taking letrozole every single day, where normally that would totally ruin you, especially the last week when you're not taking much testosterone, you're taking no testosterone. But because they're on Trenbolone, they still feel okay taking letrozole every day.
Yeah, that's crazy. I noticed with TREN, I've always felt better on TREN, sex drive, all that, when I ran my tests higher with TREN. So I may not look as good as lean, but I find that if you find a sweet spot with your estrogen, your testosterone, the look will actually be really good. Because I noticed when I run lower tests and lower E2, I will look really good, but I won't look as full. I'll look flat, really flat. But if I run high test, high TREN, and my E2 is a bit, elevated, but not like super high, it gives me a really good look. Despite the bloating, it's a really thick bodybuilder look. And I don't know, some guys, they say the test TREN ratio. What should you run your test and TREN at? And I don't really think there's a ratio for everyone. I think it really comes down to, your experience. But I would say for the most part, if you run your testosterone a bit higher, let's say 350 TREN, 600 test, you probably will feel better. Or if you run them 1-to-1, like 700 TREN, 700 test, you probably will feel better versus running 250 test, 800 TREN. That's what I've noticed. You may look a bit better with the lower test in terms of the aesthetics, but you're going to feel like fucking shit. You're insane. Just going to feel like shit. Like, not as much shit as if you were just to run, let's say, 200 test and a gram of Primo and a gram of Mastron. You would probably feel a lot like shit, but that TREN, like you said, makes it a lot harder to crash that E2. So it's going to give you a bit of a boost. I believe TREN does that, maybe with dopamine. So I noticed that when I was on straight DHT derivatives low test, I felt like shit. My skin looked really dry. My hair looked like brittle. Like, never looked like that before. I was like, what the fuck? I look like I aged like 10 years. What the fuck is this? I look like an old man now. And then when I throw the TREN in there, it's like my skin just fucking automatically looks younger. That's weird. Wonder why TREN's not supposed to do that. It's not supposed to make your skin look better, but for some reason it would always do that to me. So I believe.
Go ahead.
But you go ahead. I was pretty much done.
Okay, I was gonna say, what with your name Dtren, but that's what you've been named since you calling yourself since the beginning. But now you've experimented with a bunch of different stuff now. So you are like much more experienced now than you were when you first started just going with the TREN, which is a really common thing where guys start and they discover TREN and they go like, oh, okay, well, this is the shit. I just want to use this forever now. But now you've experimented a bunch. How do you feel about Trenbolone now at this point?
I feel like Trenbolone is still the best bang for your buck steroid. I will say that. Testosterone and Trenbolone, best bang for your buck. It's not the healthiest. It's not good for your mental health. It could fuck up all your relationships if you don't, know how to control yourself. But since I've experimented with a lot of different things, I noticed personally, I felt the best day to day running a moderate, higher test testosterone, a low and more of a moderate, higher dose of Trenbolone with low dose AI. That's when I noticed I felt the best. Or when I just ran a testosterone like 500 low dose AI. That's what I've noticed. So when I kept it really simple, just 2 compounds, driving my growth, maybe throwing Anadrol in there. That's, I'd say, when I felt the best. But once I started experimenting with equipoise, all this other stuff, I didn't feel as good. And I may have looked a bit better. Man, I don't know what it is. And I believe it's just come down to the point of estrogen. But I believe I have the same exact feelings about TREN that I did when I started it. It's still a very great compound. It makes you feel really good. You don't need to run a gram of TREN for it to work. You could run 350 milligrams and it's fucking solid. But if you are gonna run, I would say you could always add something else. I believe it would always be better to raise your testosterone than to raise your TREN if you wanted a bit more growth. But if you do raise your TREN, your testosterone should be about around the same. at least for me personally, it should be about the same or close to it. Like going off of a test and trend ratio is bullshit, you know? So if you want the best bang for your buck, that's going to be it. You know, if you really want quick results and you're like, man, I don't care. I want to be a bodybuilder. It's still the most versatile, like, compound you could run besides growth hormone and obviously insulin, which bodybuilders love. They love growth hormone and insulin.
Yeah, that's a really good point, what you said about how it's the best bang for your buck. As far as value goes and how much muscle you're going to get for the money you spend, yeah, I mean, nothing can compare to, like you said, testosterone and trenbolone. If somebody's looking for the maximum amount of muscle and spending the least amount of money in order to get that, that is it. You buy vials of trenbolone and testosterone.
Yeah, and that's what I would always do. That was like my bread and butter for so long. I've ran Tren for 20 weeks before. Tren, high test, high Tren, that was it. 20 weeks, and that was probably my best cycle ever. I made the most gains. I was 20 years old, 255 pounds, you know, slightly visible abs. I wasn't super lean, but I had veins everywhere. And people would look at me and be like, that's a 35-year-old man right there. What the fuck? And and I just felt really good on it. Of course, there was a lot of negative mental sides too, but there was so much positives with it that you were just like, you know, you'd make excuses. I'd make excuses like, oh yeah, what I did here was really bad, or I felt like shit at this time, but you know, I feel great now, and it helps me with this and that, and so I would put up with the negative sides because the positives were, in my opinion, worth it at the time, and not everyone would agree with me on that, but that's how I felt. I felt my best cycles were simple, just test and trend, you know, and maybe Anadrol or a super draw if I wanted to get, you know, a bit bigger, a bit stronger for a few weeks.
Yeah, you said you're using growth hormone and insulin now.
Yeah, I do use growth hormone and insulin, and I feel like once you get to that point, really, all right, test and trend isn't really, like, increasing the dosages aren't really doing it for me anymore. Like, you reach that kind of where you don't really get any more freakier. All right, what do I do here? You know, if your diet is at that point as it can be, you know, my diet was never perfect, but I knew it worked for my body, and I was seeing a lot of growth for a while, and then I was like, you know, these steroids really aren't hitting the same as I wanted them to. What's the next step that every bodybuilder takes? Growth hormone. Started taking growth hormone and fucking worked instantly. Helped me so much. It's very valuable hormone. What was that?
It made you bigger to take growth hormone?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Literally the first week. It may have been water weight, but I noticed what it was doing really quick. And it was nothing but positives.
Fast. People talk about, oh, you got to wait months to see growth hormone. It's like, no, man, your growth hormone's bunk.
Yeah, growth hormone really, really helped me. It leans you out too. The longer you're on it, let's say you're running a low dose, like 3 to 6 IUs, a lower moderate dosage. Over time, you'll notice it really starts just giving you that modern bodybuilder look. It molds your physique in positive ways.
Gain fat once you're on that stuff. I mean, you can eat 6,000, 7,000 calories a day. I mean, it's just insane what you can eat and not get fat on growth hormone.
Yeah, and it just works very well at what it does. And if you were to be like, man, I want like bodybuilder results now. Like, I don't give a fuck. I have all the money in the world, or I have all the access to this stuff. I want to get the most out of growth hormone. You go run 10 IUs, 8 to 10 IUs for 2 weeks. You will notice a change almost every other day in your physique. With a little bit of like, I did that. I tried it. I was like, no, I'm going to run high dosage growth hormone. I want to see a higher dosage. And I did that. And I threw in a little light dose pre-workout insulin, like 10 IUs. Always made sure to have more than enough carbs. 2 Gatorades in my bag while training and while on it.
What kind of insulin?
I did Humalog. I do Humalog. That's my favorite.
That's so you started that after you'd already gotten comfortable with growth hormone alone?
Yeah, I first took growth hormone for a solid like 2 to 3 months, and I did mess around with insulin. I messed around with I think it's called Novolin. Yeah, I think it was Novolin R. I did that for about 2 to 3 weeks, and I was kind of lazy with it, and I didn't really notice anything in particular that I liked. It just made me look a bit fluffy.
How did that
So I
make you
dropped it.
feel?
How did it make me feel?
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me feel really good.
Yeah, it made
Really
you
good.
feel good to take insulin?
Yeah, in the gym, pre-workout, really good. I just
Did you get
noticed
shaky or anything like that?
a few times. Yeah, but I've always made sure to have more than enough carbs. I never really got shaky or any like symptoms like of low blood sugar. So I
Mhm.
always made sure to get those fast acting sugary carbs and like Gatorades, bananas, all kinds of stuff. I make sure if I pinned 8 units, I make sure I have at least 80 grams to like 130 grams of carbs. And then I have my Gatorades on me, and my gummies, whether it was the Golden Bears or like fucking sour gummy worms, whatever. And if I ever felt like I needed it, I would just chew on them. I'd be like crouched down. People that know me, that go to my gym, know me. Like I'll crouch down, like squatting position near my bag, and I'll just be chewing on some fucking candy, like for like a minute or two. People are like, they probably look at me and they're like, "What the fuck is he doing?"
He's a gorilla. He's a gorilla squatting.
Yeah, it really looks like that. Like I think it's like I'd never think about it. I'd be like, "Oh, I'm just time to do this," and then people probably look at me and they're like, "Is this guy really eating a bag of fucking gummies right now? Crouched down like that? Like what the fuck?" So it's probably a funny look.
So
But
you switched
insulin,
and you finished the Novolin R and you started using
yeah,
Humulin instead. And then
yeah.
so what have you noticed that's done for you?
I feel like the Humalog works better. Like since it's a shorter ester form of insulin, fast acting, not ester.
Mhm.
It's a fast acting insulin. So I feel like it works better for me in the gym because I notice the pumps tend to be a bit better. At least that's what I feel like it does. And I don't want it in my system for a long time. I only want it in my system for an hour or two.
Was it the same thing as the growth hormone when you added the Humalog to your stack? Did you notice within a few days you were looking bigger?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. My idea was, all right, I'm running low test. The insulin will help offset any flatness I get
Mhm.
from running lower test. It'll make me look a bit bigger, and which it did. It really did work with pumps really well with the growth hormone.
What about veins? Since you've started using growth hormone, have you developed new veins?
Yeah, of course, especially in my like abdomen area, like near like my a little bit above my groin, around
Hmm.
there, my legs. You've talked
That's
about that.
you got more veins in your legs from growth hormone?
Yeah, definitely in my legs and a bit more in my arms. So when I'm on it, I notice I'm just a bit more veiny, just everywhere. But definitely my legs, they get really veiny when I'm on par with my growth hormone.
What have you noticed has given you the best upper body veins out of anything you've used or any combination that you've used?
Oh, that's such a hard one. I would say the best thing I've noticed veins for upper body is I would say is Trenbolone for
Hmm.
me. I don't know why this always brings out more veins. Some people say equipoise, but when I took it, it kind of bloated me up a little bit, like threw more water retention on me.
Hmm.
And I did notice a bit more veins, but it wasn't as pronounced as TREN. So TREN is what I noticed gave me a lot of veins. So did Anadrol. High dosage Anadrol with TREN gave me a lot of veins.
Yeah, Anadrol is a main one. Anadrol really pumps up the upper body. It just makes you look like you're a action figure or something.
Yeah, Anadrol is really good for that. What I can say is Anadrol just swells up, swells you up everywhere in your upper body, and your legs too. My legs were really beefy looking on Anadrol, but that it really just blows you up everywhere. What I've noticed, different than D-ball. D-ball is like you almost look fucking a little bit fat. Just kind of you look like a fat fuck. But on Anadrol, it's like you look more like thick and round. Thick and round, and your delts really. Anadrol was one that really brought out my delts and my biceps and my triceps a lot.
Man, yeah, pre-workout or intra-workout nutrition with Anadrol is like a nuclear ballistic missile to your glycogen.
Yeah, I would always I was working body work, so I was always sanding shit. I was doing work, and I didn't have a lot of money. This was around when I was 20 years old, 21, and for lunch I would go to McDonald's and I would get like 4 McDoubles, large fry. I don't advise anyone does this, but this is what I would do. And I was on like a gram of test, gram of TREN, and 150 Anadrol. You go to McDonald's, get 4 McDoubles, a large fry, and like a large Powerade. And I would eat all that like a few hours before the gym, and then and then pre-workout.
That must have been a good workout. Shit.
Yeah, in pre-workout, I would have like a banana or two, and that was it. And I'd be in the gym, pumped up, and I would obviously be, swelled up from all the sodium. Dude, my fucking veins were insane. Like, I got fucking I don't even know. They were just like hoses in my arms, and my arms looked like they'd gained a solid inch. Like, my arms probably as biggest as they ever been. Like, they were probably close to 20 inches, maybe 19 or 20. It's like they added an inch to like my arms instantly in a matter of weeks, and I was so fucking full. And I would have the best pumps of my life. Like, I wouldn't even really need much of a Gatorade or nothing in the gym because of all the shit I would eat at lunch.
4 McDoubles. I mean, that's a really, I believe in fast food too for bodybuilding size. Guys, clean diet is good. Clean diet is good. But when you're going for like maximum size and you gotta like gain a lot of weight, and you're getting up 230, 240, 250 pounds, it's like, well, you know what? Some junk food is going to be in there, and some junk food seems to have some kind of reaction with the gear. It just does. Like burgers, pizza, even. Where it mixes with the gear and things just get ballistic. So it sounds like 4 McDoubles, a large fry, and a big Gatorade pre-workout. That I can just see what that's gonna do. Because I know what the steroids do and everything. You're saying you're taking 150 Anadrol, a gram of TREN, and a gram of test with that. I mean, shit, I can imagine the workouts.
They were really aggressive. I felt really strong, really aggressive, sweaty. The pumps were insane. People would look at my arms, and their eyes wouldn't even be looking at me in the eyes. They'd just be looking at my hands and my fucking forearms and biceps, because my hands would be all swollen and veins would just be all over my fucking arms. My blood pressure was probably really fucking high. So that wasn't healthy at all, but it was what I was doing. I was 255 pounds at 20 years old, and I needed to get as much calories in my system as possible, and that's what was easier for me at the time, working 8 to 9 hours a day, and then going to the gym. I was like, well, I don't really want to make a meal I need calories now.
What are some other go-to fast food meals for size for you?
Other fast food meals? I like to just keep
Size,
it
yeah.
simple.
When you're doing size, yeah.
I would say just anything with a lot of sodium, like McDonald's. Sandwich places are really good. Pizza. Pizza kind of messes with my stomach, but I would say the most consistent is like a McDonald's. I'd say my stomach doesn't really get messed up eating McDonald's or an In-N-Out or a Subway. Shit like that is really good on my stomach, and I don't feel like shit. Versus a pizza, I've ate a whole large pizza. Kind of just tend to feel like shit for a while after doing that, but it does work. Pizza does work. But I did it in such a way that I wasn't going overboard. Like I was not eating 7,000 calories a day. I was probably eating closer to 4,000 around there.
Yeah, that's fairly moderate for your size.
Yeah, I've never had to eat a lot to gain muscle ever. I think when I was cruising, I would eat around 2,500 calories a day, maybe a bit less. And I was 230 on the 250 test, 230 pounds. I hold on to my size really well.
Calories?
Yeah.
Jeez.
I don't know why my body's like that, but for some reason I gain muscle very easily as long as my dosages are in the right spot. And once I do that, it's like I don't really have to change my diet a whole lot if I want to gain muscle. In fact, if I go on a cutting cycle and I throw in TREN, I keep my calories the same, I'll probably gain 5 pounds by that first or second week and get leaner.
So that McDonald's meal that you were talking about with the 4 burgers, the fries, and the Gatorade, that's probably the highest calorie meal you ever do then.
Yeah, for the most part. If I'm really hungry, I'll throw in some like a 10-piece like McNugget in there as well for the extra protein and calories. But by that time, I usually can't finish it majority, so I'll just go to that. That's what's always worked for me. That's what kind of people know me as, like on TikTok. I used to talk about it all the time because I would get it so much. I would eat that like 4 or 5 times a week, like every other day, damn near.
It's part of your muscle building routine then.
Yeah, even on cuts, I could eat fast food like every day if I wanted to. I just have to really pay attention. Like I could have one cheat meal every day as long as the rest of my food is moderately clean and I'm not going overboard.
What's your go-to workout for arms?
For biceps or triceps?
Both.
For biceps, I've always really liked easy bar close grip preacher curl. It's always been probably one of my most effective because you're not using your body a whole lot and you're not using a whole lot of your shoulder. And I just noticed that preacher, once you go to about 70 to 100 pounds, it's really challenging. And if you really focus on that negative, the time under tension it's always been one of the harder ones for me. And I think that's why it's so good, because every time I drop that easy bar down after I felt like my bicep was going to snap or tear, I'd get up and my arms are instantly fucking pumped, like they hurt. So I think the preacher curl, the close grip, is very underrated. I say that's probably been my favorite one. Like I know I'll get a good pump out of doing that. And then
when you do those how far do you let the arm extend? Do you let it extend all the way straight, or do you keep the bicep in kind of a flex position?
I go pretty much all the way straight, if not pretty damn close. Pretty damn close. So I really try to stretch that bicep out, and not everyone can do that like comfortably, but I'd say my biceps are a very strong muscle group with me. My arms, I could lift a lot of weight with them. So I really go for that full stretch. And if I go heavier, I tend to go about 90%. And if I feel too much tension where it doesn't feel good, I won't go all the way down. But for the most part, yeah, I go almost all the way straight as much as I can
Mm-hmm.
to really get that full stretch of the bicep. I believe that's where all the growth comes from, that particular exercise.
Nice. And then
Yeah,
you were
the
saying,
triceps.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, from my other favorite bicep is the alternating dumbbells, heavy,
Mhm.
so like 35 to 55 pounds, as many reps as you can do.
Dumbbell.
Yeah, those have been one of my favorites. So I just always feel like a badass doing those. I don't know why. Like, you got the mirror, you're doing your curls, and like, how does that not? That looks fucking cool. You got 50 pounds in each arm, and you're curling them. Good form. That's
Yeah.
a badass workout right there. You get a nice
Yeah.
pump till failure.
Yeah. I mean, that can even pump up your traps too.
Yeah. My forearms take a really hard beating on those as well. I have really ginormous forearms, and people are like, what do you do to train your forearms? I never train them directly. I just do. I throw in like a lot of heavy curls, like if it's a preacher, if it's a dumbbell, but it's probably those dumbbells. I really built my forearms.
Do you do hammer curls?
I do. Not a whole lot, because I find that my forearms are pretty damn big as they are. Every once in a while I'll do hammers, but I like to focus more on training my bicep. So my inner and outer bicep to maximize the peak. So I can have that like Arnold look in my biceps. They're really long. So I do whatever I can to really focus on building that peak in my arms as much as I can. So that's what I do. I really focus on that part. But I noticed once I started training my triceps harder, added a lot of width to my arms from the front, which is a good look. And I find that if you want to get a nice arm pump, train your arms. Just go for an arm day, like 15 sets each, biceps, triceps, whatever. Start with your triceps first. Start with your triceps. You notice by the time your triceps are pumped, when you're training your biceps, your arms look twice the size, because that tricep is popping, and you can see it in the front. In the front of your arm, you see that side tricep popping out, which adds that width to your arm.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like doing that. But my favorite tricep workout, I would say, has always been a simple like push down, more of a normal grip push down, and a French press easy bar, laying down flat on a bench, French press, so right above your eyes.
Mm-hmm. When you do
I
the
really
push,
like the French
you
press.
use the rope or do you use a steel attachment?
I use the steel attachments.
Uh-huh.
I really like the steel attachments better. A bit more narrow. I like the narrow steel attachments. The ropes, I like them too. I just noticed for some reason I start cheating more on the ropes because it feels a bit harder for me.
Uh-huh.
Like I have to go lighter. I don't know what it is about that rope, but it's always like when I'm doing it, I'm like, fuck, man. I don't feel as strong as when I'm doing that attachment versus that rope. So I always prefer the bar about narrow. I switch it up sometimes. I'll go wide. And I
Do you
like
ever
to do
do what were you gonna say?
oh no, you go ahead.
Okay. Do you ever do a close grip bench press for your triceps?
I used to all the time, and I stopped doing them once I injured my shoulder a while back. But I think I'm gonna start incorporating them, because when I did do them, they worked very well.
Mm-hmm.
Close grip bench press. It's very effective, I would say. You could really throw on the weight on that one.
About shoulder width grip, right? With your arms just straight out in front of you.
I would go even more narrow than that. I'd go a bit closer than my shoulders.
That would
Like
burn
maybe,
out the triceps.
yeah, I'd say a little bit where your traps would be. Around
Mm-hmm.
there, where your traps would be. Not shoulder width, because I feel like still doing a bit more chest, but if you move your arms in where your traps or neck is narrow. For me personally, that's always hit them pretty damn hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Close grip bench press is pretty killer. And then
people neglect their triceps. They really do. I how do I know this? Because I did that for so long. I neglected my triceps. I only trained biceps really hard, and my triceps. Now let me do a push down. Wait, and they never grew.
What was the biggest when your triceps started growing more? What was the most important factor there?
Anadrol.
Great answer.
No, the heavy French press,
Okay.
heavy push downs, and the 100-pound easy bar, working up to 50 pounds for 5 sets, all the way to 100 pounds on the French press laying down, with your legs kind of in the air a little bit, legs off the floor.
I can imagine that gets that feeling in the tricep where it almost feels like the muscle is squeezing against itself. There's a few exercises that cause that feeling. One would be like the hamstring curl, the lying hamstring curl, where you curl the hamstring and it almost feels like the hamstring's going to explode because it feels like it's kind of pushing against itself. And then the French press, like you said, with the bar coming up where your eyes are, and then about halfway up back on that extension with your arm, it feels like the tricep is pushing against itself like it's going to explode.
Definitely, yeah. And it really develops that hang of the tricep. When you have your arm, straightened out, to your side, that hang, that's what it really develops. And people really compliment me on that hang on my tricep. And they're like, how do you get that? And I tell them the French press. That's why it gave me that really developed thickness, the hang of the tricep area.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'd say those are my favorite.
Those all sound good. Extreme exercises. So with being a bodybuilder and everything, how do you feel about being a bodybuilder? Because I mean, you're definitely at the size, now where the average person is not going to be aspiring to have your body. Yeah, you're not somebody who has the average guy on the street. He's thinking, oh, I want to be like that. He's thinking he wants to be more like an Abercrombie and Fitch model, but you are much bigger than that. So he's probably thinking, oh, that he's a freak. I'm not looking to be like him. How do you feel, being a freak, How does that make you feel?
To be honest, Dan, I'll be honest, I do not feel like a freak. The normal person, they're like, yeah, fucking right. But I do not feel like I'm a freak, because when I look at bodybuilders, I look at these open guys and these classic guys, or guys on, that are IFBB pros, and I'm like, damn, like, that guy's a fucking freak. But to the normal person that looks at me, they probably like, damn, this guy's fucking huge. I don't notice it because I'm looking at the guys bigger than me, and that's how we all do it. We don't really realize how big we truly are, and that probably goes in a bit with body dysmorphia. I would say it feels really, really good. It feels really good. I feel really proud of myself. I always want to look better.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of dudes that are in fitness, or that really like fitness, they see my physique and they want to look like me. They say, you look really good. Like the naturals, or the guys that are first starting their cycles, that are in my Discord, they aspire to look like me. They want to look like me. And, it makes me really happy. And I feel like I'm at that point now where if you're in the gym and you really like bodybuilding, and you have a bit of a passion for it, you'll look at my physique and be like, yeah, I want to look like that, like more classic, golden era. Then you look at open bodybuilders, and guys are like, no way. Like, that's gross. It doesn't look good. And then, so that makes me feel good because that's what I've always wanted. I've looked at guys like Arnold. I've always wanted to look like those guys because they had a bit of beauty and attractiveness to them that a woman could look at them, still be attracted to them. Like, it's not going to make you look ugly or worse compared to if you're 280 pounds at 5'9". Yeah, you're a fucking freak. So it makes me happy that I'm in that stage where I look like a bodybuilder, but I'm not gross looking compared to what the average person will think. And yet there's people that are 100, maybe that don't even bodybuild, and they look at me and be like, no, that's too much. And that's fine. They're normal people. Let them think that, because this is what I want to look like. It makes me happy. But as long as I look at myself and I'm like, yeah, I look good. This is what I want. That's always been my goal. But I say I'm really proud of it. It's improved my life in every way. It hasn't made me less attractive to the opposite sex. It hasn't made people look at me and be like, ew. I'd say it's boosted my attractiveness, because not only do I look better, I feel better now. I feel more powerful. I feel more dominant. I feel more energetic. In return, those are all attractive traits in men. Women like those traits in men. Some guys like those traits in men. So as you even say it all the time, watching your story on Instagram, you were talking about when you feel like shit, knowing that you can only go to a quarter cc or a half cc or a full cc a week on your injections, and you can't just load up 5 cc's and then wake up 2 or 3 days later, look like you gained 10 pounds and feel like you're a fucking tyrant again. You don't have that powerful, hyper masculine feel anymore. You're now like an average guy. You're just kind of strolling around life at this point. You're on cruise mode.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's literally what it is. You're just cruising. You're not really going up. You're just stagnant, or maybe you're going down a little bit. That's how cruising is for bodybuilders that really have actually pushed the dosages. We notice a difference when we're on versus when we're actually doing a real cruise.
Yeah, and that's another weird thing too, because people talk shit about like high dosages a lot, and we all know, when we've already been there, done that, we all know that that's bullshit, that no one's using high dosages. But so for these guys that have never used them though, they might think like, oh, well, you don't need to do that or something. They might say stuff like that. But the reality is that taking high dosages feels good. It feels powerful. Yeah. I mean, I talk to guys who use high dosages, and what they tell me is, I do it because I like the way it makes me feel.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It makes you feel makes you feel more of a man. Who wouldn't want to feel? Well, it's like, I'd say, like, why do you need to feel like more of a man? Why can't you already feel like that natural? It's like, you don't fucking understand. We're injecting synthetic hormones in our body, high amounts. It's going to give you a completely different feeling that you can never get naturally. You're literally turning yourself into a super male.
Yeah.
By doing that, because this is something you could never achieve 150 years ago. This when you've really pushed it. If you've ever ran a gram of test, or you've ever ran a gram of TREN, or 150 milligrams of Anadrol, or 3 grams of total steroids a week, you'll know what I'm talking about. You'll know that feeling, that really powerful feeling that you cannot get. And you even talk about it when you come off. You say, I needed a dose of reality a bit. I needed to let my ego calm down. And I think there's definitely, if you notice guys on steroids that are actually taking the proper dosages, I could say this to myself, I'm a nice dude, but people can just look at me and be like, damn, this guy's a bit conceited. He's in the gym, he's not looking at anyone or talking to anyone. He walks right past people, and then after every set, he's just staring at himself in the mirror. You're like, people around you don't even exist sometimes. Like, you walk in there like you own the fucking place, get your pumps in, and you're just staring in the mirror 95% of the fucking time. And they just make you act different. I had someone tell me this. I had someone say that they could tell someone's on steroids by how they act, even if they don't necessarily look the part.
Yeah, it definitely changes your behavior and personality to some extent.
I found that women notice it. Some women notice this. And I found that some women, for some reason, are really into guys on steroids. And it's not just because of their body. Like, they like them looking big, muscular, and in shape, like girls that go to the gym and that seek out more dominant, powerful men. It's because how they act. They find it really attractive. It's actually more common than what you'd think. There's even girls on like TikTok making videos about saying they want a guy on TREN, like when he's on TREN, and they'll make like a sexual gesture about it. And the natties in the comments thank me a little bit. I talked about TREN a lot, so there's probably a reason why women are starting to understand it a bit more. But there'll be natural dudes in the comments. They'll be like, no, fuck that. Like, you don't want a guy on TREN when he fucking beats you. Or when he has a fucking heart attack. And the girls are like, if he's not on steroids, I don't want him. Or if he's not on TREN, when he's on TREN. And like, these women know what TREN does to guys, like they've heard about it, but for some reason they're just into the mindset. If it's not even TREN, if it's just steroids, they're just into that mindset that gear gives you. And for some reason, a lot of girls have been making more of those TREN videos. I've noticed. I've seen like maybe 10 or 15 of them in the past few months.
Man, that's funny. I've never seen a TREN video from a girl.
Yeah, if you talk to like girls that go to the gym that are, younger, like 20 to 25, maybe 30, that, actually enjoy working out, and you bring up TREN, most of them probably know what you're talking about now. A good portion, like more than usual compared to 3 to 5 years ago.
Steroids are definitely becoming more just out there. People just know that they're being used. It's not quite as quiet just in general. It's more accepted gym culture.
No, yeah, it really is. It's not just like a big secret that people will see a dude on gear by how he looks or acts, and then they talk shit about him like, oh, look, that's a steroid user right there. He's all sweaty and he has acne. Puts a needle in his body every week.
Yeah,
like, look how mysterious he is. Like, now people, and how much of an asshole he is. Now people know, like, what steroids do, and people come up to me all the time, and I'll talk about it openly in the gym. Like, yeah, I'm on TREN right now, or I'm on growth hormone, or I'm on insulin. People are like really into it. Like, it's becoming a part of the gym culture, kind of like how golden era bodybuilders used to be. They probably were doing the same shit back then when it was less stigmatized in the gym. Like, oh, what are you running? Oh, I'm running D-ball, Primobolan, Anavar. My doctor just gave me some Anavar and some Winstrol, and some Deca, and some Primo, and some Proviron. Gave me
got you on anabolic steroid therapy.
Yeah, that used to be a thing. Old era dudes would go to their doctor and they'd write him a script of all these different steroids. I remember you talking about that.
Yeah, I mean, it still happens to some degree, at some of these clinics, in America, they prescribe Winstrol, Anadrol, etc. still.
Yeah, like the old school guys would just slam down a bottle of Winstrol pre-workout. they'd
rim
have
house.
they'd get their Winstrol, take the whole fucking thing. Piss would be like brown. But I heard stories of them doing that. Maybe not all of them, but I definitely heard a lot of crazy stories back then that guys now would be like, what the fuck? And the whole reason why bodybuilders started carrying around water jugs.
What about the water jugs?
So I heard, I don't know who it was from, but bodybuilders, when you'd see guys in football or guys at the gym carrying around the water bottles, the big ones. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why they would do that is because they were slamming so many oral steroids down. So they'd carry a big, thing of water around them wherever they went because they weren't drinking water. Their liver was probably getting really hammered.
Okay.
And they'd carry that around and they'd drink.
Gallon jug.
Yeah, they'd carry around the gallon jug. And then it was never really told to people that's why they did it. They just did it. And other, kids would emulate it, playing football or playing sports, or when they got on their creatine cycle, go to the gym with this giant water bottle. They're, starting their 5 grams of creatine. And they're like, man, I feel bloated as fuck on this creatine. I'm pissing every fucking 15 minutes. Piss as clear as can be, but I'm so fucking bloated. I'm like, I'll talk to them. I'm like, you know why, you're bloated, right? The creatine? No, it's fucking that water jug you're carrying around. Do you know why people used to carry those around? And I tell them, they were taking tons of oral steroids. And what you're doing is you're making yourself having to piss every 20 minutes, thinking that creatine is wrecking your kidneys. You're taking fucking halotestin for 3 months straight. People would really think that creatine was extremely kidney toxic, that they needed to just drink water constantly.
I hate that creatine. Fuck that creatine.
People would tell them, hey, when you take creatine, you gotta drink adequate amount of water, and people would think, adequate amount. It means I need to drink more water. And in return, they're just having to piss every 20 minutes because they're drinking too much fucking water.
Those creatine steroids, very dangerous.
Yeah, and if you think about it, it makes sense. Who else were taking oral steroids in the 70s? Football players.
Mm-hmm.
They were taking Dianabol. Shit, they probably were taking a lot of them. So they carry those jugs around. And I always laugh when I see him. So I'm kind of laughing when I see him carrying it around and sipping on it after every set. I'm like, man, it just always brings me back to that. And when I tell them that, they're they feel a little stupid. Oh, I didn't know that. And I'm like, yeah, that's, you can still drink it, but that's where it came from.
Yeah, that's you're gonna have to piss a lot. You're right.
Yeah.
They're piss bottle, huh?
Yeah, man, I have to piss all the time, and I'm so fucking bloated. Well, yeah, you're drinking too much fucking water.
I guess that's what we can call those guys from now. Piss bottle guys.
Piss bottle guys. Yeah. Yeah, that's funny.
All right, looks like it's been about an hour and 20 minutes here. We better wrap up the podcast. But Dtren, where can people find you on social media? Where can the people listening to this, where can they check out your content?
So in YouTube, it's going to be Dtren 800, same as Instagram. So Dtren, DTREN 800, and on TikTok, just type in Dtren. You should find me. Very easy to find. I'm all over it. So yeah, and I don't really talk about gear as much on my YouTube. I do more Q&As, but it's mainly on TikTok. But definitely more on YouTube as well. I definitely will be posting. I like doing the Q&As, and usually my Q&As have a lot of steroid talk included in it.
Cool. Do you do those live?
No, I just do them off of Instagram. I'll post it a day or two before, and I'll have tons of questions, and I kind of pick out which ones to answer. from my followers.
Right on. So that's how they can communicate with you for the Q&A.
Yeah.
All right, Dtren. Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast, bro. And I know everybody likes listening to you on here. It's been good having you on here, man. And we'll look back forward to having you on again soon.
All right. Thank you, brother. Yeah, I can't wait till the next time.